It's the OCGFAM show. We've been talking about Cerces Serum for a long time, but now that it's finally available, let's get serious about this. Hey there! Bob from Oregon's Constant Garden. Welcome to the OCGFAM show to you, my YouTube buddies. What's going on? How's everybody doing? Let me know in the comments and we'll talk about it after the show. Right now, let's just get into the show. Cerces Serum. I've been talking about it for a long time. It is finally available. Some places around the country, I believe, but definitely at OCGFAM.com. You can get it. What is it? What's the deal with it? In the last viewer questions episode, at the start of the episode, Scott and I talked about it for a good 20 minutes. I asked him a bunch of questions and he answered them, and it was very informative. I know you may have already seen that when you saw the viewer questions episode, but I wanted to put it into a separate episode for everyone to see. So I've got the clip. I want you to watch it. I'll talk to you after. Bob needs some answers, buddy. What is the difference between Herc and Cerces Serum? Having a lot of debates in the Nectar for Dummies chat. We get it different. It's different than bone meal, but are there any benefits to using it over Herc? Would you do a 50-50 mix with Herc? So how does it, I guess, because I wanted to answer this one, even I pulled them out of order, because what's the difference between this and Herc? Obviously, they are similar in some fashion. Are they analog to each other? Are they different? Can you talk to that?
Well, first and foremost, it was brought about because of certain folks who didn't want to use cow bone for whatever reason. Again, like Tritons with the fish bone, you know, what we found was another source of this calcium phosphate from a bone meal, but not from cow. That's
okay.
That issue. So the pork is interesting because it's very similar to cow in the sense of it's high in calcium phosphate. It's got a nice calcium load. The biggest difference we found right out of the gate was solubility. When we grind cow bone versus when we grind pork bone and then we go into digestion, I mean, the pork bone takes far less time. It becomes soluble a lot quicker just with water. We don't need to use nearly the amount of fulvic acid. We don't have to stabilize it as much. We've added no gum to this product, so it's a much thinner product. So a lot of guys, you know, that are pushing with their gardens, they usually tend to start pumping Herculean in at a pretty higher rate.
Yeah.
You get that gum build up or the solids on the soil.
On the top, yeah.
Complain, and it's a pain. But they're trying to push harder and harder during the flowering stage, and that's the best way to do it. So the nice thing with Cerces is you can now really push hard. Without the gum on there, it's not going to build up the solids on the surface like the Herc does. You're adding in the parts per million and the calcium phosphate to kind of help that flowering cycle and the calcium uptake. So it's a great way to kind of push harder if you need to push harder.
So with the Tritons, I think there was this, you know, it's the same, but it's not, to where you couldn't replace Herc with Tritons.
No, and the cartilage part, I mean, the main part there was the cartilage.
Okay.
I think the cartilage does not have the calcium phosphate that the calcium bone has in a mammal. So
okay, yeah.
The big difference there, we saw different terpenes, different aesthetics, different density in the fruit, different, it was just different.
Yeah.
So we look at Tritons as more of an enhancement to what, you know, Herculean can do into the recipe. Where Cerces could be switched in and out between the two. It has the same properties as far as, you know, the calcium phosphate, the structure of the plant's being built the same way Herculean is. The unique thing, however, is that we're seeing another set of terpene profiles that are being enhanced from the pork bone versus cow, which is giving us more of the earthy terpene terps. I mean, it's like more of the sages, the, you know, oregano, I don't know, it's more earth blend smells versus fruity and florally that Herc kind of gives us with Pegasus, or the gas and fuel that Tritons gives us with the cartilage. So it's just another tool to kind of really spin, dial, and tweak your terpene profiles. It's a great tool if you really want to push harder in the flowering cycle without building up a lot of solids on the surface. And the one thing we did notice is it's not the best for a flush in the sense of removing high ppms. It does, I mean, it doesn't hurt anything, but it's not reducing the ppms as fast or as efficiently as the Herculean calcium phosphate is. So it's not a final flush product. It's not a preventative flush product like Herc is. But for every other aspect, it can be interchanged or blended with Herc. You know, 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 1-to-2. You know, it comes down to dialing it in your grow.
You could not drop the Herc, though, in your opinion?
You could drop it if you don't want this florally, and if you're really trying to dial in the terpene profile and you don't like rose terpenes in your cannabis, then yeah, drop it out completely. Put in the Cerces. You're gonna see very similar yields, very similar structures. I mean, everything should very much be the same as far as how the plant builds itself. The main difference we see between the two is just terpenes.
And the flush situation. If you were
the flush and not knocking the ppms down fast.
So it's conceivable you could run a system here with no Herculean harvest, but you may run into some issues with your ppms, or you may not. It may be fine depending on other issues probably and how you're feeding and all that.
If everything else is dialed, I mean, if your alkalinity is right, your pH is right, you're feeding right, your environment's right, the ppm thing is only an issue if your pH takes a nosedive, or you've overfed 16 times in a row and you've accelerated it. But if you've got a really perfect grow going, I mean, it shouldn't be an issue to just have it. Now, whether or not you're going to really love that terpene profile at the end will be your last, how you're going to hang your ribbon on your cannabis.
And if you were just really wanting to push, you might still need some Herc in there because of its ability to flush and get you out of a situation that you may get yourself into by pushing hard.
Yeah.
Would you, you're just running your Greek line, you're doing your business. Would you try this to add to see what's going on with it? Or if you're happy with what you got, just stick with what you got? Or
I personally, when we first started, we did two things. We did one just Herc and one with 1-to-1 Herc one with just Cerces and one with our normal feeding, adding Cerces in 1-to-1 with Herc.
Okay.
So if it was at 2 tablespoons, we were 1 and 1. If it was at 3, we were doing 1.5, 1.5. And very similar yields, very similar health, all the quality pieces were there. The biggest difference really was the one with the blends had a very broad terpene spectrum that was kind of like all over the map with all different types of terpenes, and none of them were like overly enhanced or overwhelming to the nose, where just the Cerces was very clear. We weren't bringing in some of these floral terpenes that we would get from Herc. Instead, we were getting very much not grass and hay kind of earth smells, but very much like tones of herbs and spices and things that you use for cooking. I mean, it really kind of gave a lavender smell.
Mushroom kind of thing, or
no? Mushroomy, just musty.
Yeah,
but not like you'd want from a GMO. Like if you're growing GMO, like mushroom onion, GMO, this would really enhance those nastier feet smell.
Red wine, white wine situation?
Similar. Yeah.
Okay.
It's closer to really like Pegasus doing what it does. Tritons does what this does. Now Cerces is bringing in more of the culinary flavors versus the florally flavors or the fuely flavors.
Is it a by the gallon product, or would some people use this like they use Tritons where they get a quart to enhance what they're doing?
Depends on your taste, really. I mean, I think if someone really wants to stick with the Greek that they've tried and true, has been working great, and they're using a gallon, then they'd probably be at a quart with Cerces to see where they want to play with it.
Okay.
I've already got guys buying drums of it because of the solubility and the ease of use, and they can just hammer their plants. So it's really going to come down to what's the tool for you, what are you using that tool for, and how hard are you going to use that tool.
So this can be a thing of like, I'd rather not use cows. This can be a thing of a flavor thing. Now, let me ask you this question. Can this be a thing of where I'm trying to push harder and I get the gum buildup, or I get this or that with the Herc, and between the two of these, I build the perfect ratio to push hard with the solubility, to get my uptake, and to get... Does that make any sense what I'm asking?
No. Yeah, in a sense. What's the question, though?
Is this between, you could use the Herc and the Cerces in concert to push even harder than you might push with the Herc itself because of gum buildup and solubility and things like that.
And I think that's kind of what we see the most is some people kind of hit their ceiling of ppms on inputs, feel like they could push even harder for more yield, and I think this is instead of just increasing the same ingredient to 10x, you could bring this one and maintain everything else at your normal or slightly enhanced, and then bring Cerces in as kind of your nitrous to the fuel.
So maybe a little bit of a free ride of where you can push a little harder without dealing with some of the issues you may have had otherwise.
Yeah, I'd say that more.
Okay. Yeah. Just big picture of like, I'm using this by itself, I'm using it as a flavor, or I'm using the two of them together. Does that in any way affect Bloom Chaos?
No. I mean, it really... So far, the guys who did just Cerces no Herc, and same with all their Chaos, or they were applying Chaos the same, they literally kept everything the same, and they didn't see anything different, really, as far as like, I needed more Cerces to balance the Chaos's needs.
Or less.
One thing I have been getting pretty consistently back is when used in the transition end of veg early bloom, they're seeing faster just flower production and flower sets. So they're seeing it just kind of take off a bit. And I think a lot of that has to do with we know we digest our Herc bones all the way down to nothing, but the solubility of this hog bone may just be triggering that flowering cycle a little bit faster. So they're seeing flower sets quicker and just earlier flower production. And I'd like more reports back on folks who have been trying it to see if that's a similar gauge for them.
Would you say, have you been hearing people say it's harder to fuck up with? I mean, pushing too hard to get into some tip burn and that sort of thing? Or easier because of the solubility? Or that just hasn't been an issue yet? Or
it hasn't, not reported yet.
Okay. No. Would this affect, all things being equal and you're moving back and forth between them, are there any issues with your slurry test as far as parts per million? As far as like you have more, it works the same.
Yeah, it literally is just another additive. So when you're doing your slurries, you don't have to look at, okay, well, now that I add this, then I can increase, No, it's the same guidelines for your slurries, even with this added.
Okay. So, did I cut you off? No? Yeah, no?
No, it's a good question.
Chris Salty Banana 77, and we may have already covered this, but he said, hey, Bob, what are the benefits of using Cerces? Is there anything you would add to what we've already talked about?
No, I think we got it.
Okay, then, Cannaboys Dank, when do you add the Hogbone Nectar product in? I think he's referring to when you mix it in the mix. As far as we have like kind of an order that we've always had for how you add the products in. Would you add it in before or after the Herc, or does it matter?
Oh, yeah, before or right after. But they're interchangeable, so put them together. I mean, wherever the bone meal falls on your feeding schedule, that's when you would add in the Cerces, same time as Herc.
Okay.
Before or after it, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay, I have a question. The pH of it, roughly the same?
Yeah, it should be right down there in the 3.2, 3.4.
So
it's gonna. Yep. It just doesn't have as much, like if you have alkaline water with a high pH starting point, it doesn't have as much of a drawdown as Herc does. So it's not a great pH adjusting bone meal, but it has a low pH in the bottle so it doesn't explode. So
you'd be a little more judicious with your Olympus up when you're mixing your feed to pH at first until you figure it out. You may use less Olympus, and is that an issue?
No, it shouldn't be. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't have to use any Olympus.
Sure.
To me, it's the only time they have an issue, but outside of that, no.
Okay.
You should be fine.
If I was using this as, by the quart, like using it as some sort of flavoring thing, is there a time frame with the growth cycle, veg, blooms, any kind of issues with that? When would I put it in that way, as far as in my cycle?
If you're just doing it for flavor, I'd wait till flower set. So
okay.
You've got female plants, you know that they're starting to stack, that's when you'd want to start adding that in to just enhance the terpenes. As soon as those trichomes start to form, you want that oil to be triggering that terpene response in the plant to actually start making the aromas happen. So
this is going to come up. Is it anything you would ever use as a foliar?
The Herc?
No, the Cerces.
I mean the Cerces?
Yeah.
I mean, no, I'm just not a believer in calcium in bone form ever being available through the foliage, so it's just spraying white juice on green surfaces to make you panic about mildew down the road. So it's not available. It's not as available at all through the stomata.
If I were doing this only using Cerces, I dumped Herc for whatever reason, would my flush day be any different?
The biggest difference there would be you would need more water and probably a lot more SLF to make sure your ppms drop faster. So for your last flushes, then you'd want to do, we've had a couple do the final flush all the way through with the Cerces, and there was no bad outcome. It just didn't reduce the ppms the same way. And so we'd have to do more experiments on flushing the final ripening stage. But I can't see why it would do anything different than a Herc as far as building the internal structure of the plant.
So, but everything we've said is like fairly early results. I mean, you've been working at this for quite some time, but you've been working at the Herc for decades, and so we may find new information as we go forward.
Oh, yeah. Well, be prepared. Welcome to the giant revolving door of Nectar is, as we give this out and more growers are purchasing this, the more information we're getting back. But after, I think we've been 19 months going at this product with, a year of just testing to make sure it is a viable product to the last 8 months of putting it in indoor growers' hands to see what it does on the indoor side. And so far, there's been no surprises, nothing shocking, other than everybody seems to be very pleased with how they can push and the solubility without having the solids. So that's the main thing we see back from folks is, I'm really pleased with this. My terpenes did change, but I do like the solubility of it. Now, what we'll find in a year from now, there'll probably be 5 awesome tricks in a year from now that we're going to have to redo another show because we found that when you do this, you get that. When you do that, you get this. So we'll wait and see.
So I'm just Joe Grower, fairly experienced. I'm running my Greek, or maybe my Greek and then some, and I'm excited about this new product. How would I integrate that into my grow? And would I do that midstream, or would I wait till the next time around?
Well, if you're running all Nectar, then feel free, midstream it. It's not going to hurt anything because it can just come in. But what I would do, let's say you're mid-bloom, you've been running the Greek recipe, and you're at 3 tablespoons of Herc.
Okay.
Because you've been pushing.
Yeah.
Now you want to bring in Cerces. My first few feedings, I'd take I'd balance it. I'd stick to the 3 tablespoons because I know that that's been safe. So take one of those tablespoons of Herc away, add that in as Cerces, and then water that way for a week. Monitor, watch. You won't see anything bad happen, but just see what your plant and how your plant responds to it, and then start increasing those from whatever stage you started at. But when you enter it in by removing part of the other bone meal product, and then take those 2 together and increase them. Instead of just going, okay, well, I'm at Greek, mid-flower, I'm going to come in and add an ounce per gallon of Cerces to this already recipe that's been doing just fine.
Are we going to see a new feeding chart?
Eventually, yeah. Between the microbes, the chimera, the Cerces, we do need to come up with a new feeding chart. We're just getting through this test run season because I don't want to put it out there and be like, okay, well, this is how you do it, and we don't really know how 100 growers are doing it yet.
Okay. That covers it, right? I for
think
now.
So.
Okay. Okay, what do you think of that? Informative, entertaining, helpful? I know that was kind of a rerun. It was a rerun because we had this in the viewer questions episode, but I wanted to make its own separate episode, not just so more people would see it, but also so we could have this as a basis for talking about this, for further discussion, further questions for the next viewer questions episode. So let me know what you're thinking about Cerces Serum. Are you going to try it? Have you tried it? Do you think... I don't know. Let's talk about it some more. I love you, and I'll see you tomorrow. The OCG Fam Show. It's pretty good. It happens every day. It's the OCG Fam Show. See you tomorrow.